Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Rostermania going absolutely wild right now. So much going on. Loads of new rumours last night we're going to dive into, but the big one of course, OpTic Kenny returning to OpTic after the OGLA stint a few years ago is the most likely candidate as it stands to go onto the OpTic team. He's the player that OpTic wants. Highly controversial, this will be said if it happens. Lots of mixed opinions on this over the last 24 hours if this comes true. Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'm at a hotel right now. I'm on the road for a couple of days, so if anything mad happens tonight, I probably won't be able to make a video immediately, but I'll do my best because, man, it's all kicking off at the moment. We'll have to start with this, though, and as a UK Call of Duty fan that got into the scene when Zer0 was starting to dominate, really, 2016, 2017 in terms of UK European Call of Duty, it is a sad day to see him officially retire. He confirmed it last night. It's come to the time to retire from professional COD. If any CDL teams are looking for a coach or GM, so, Coach Cartier coming soon with any luck. And yeah, as he says, become one of the first EU players to win an event on NA soil, of course, Stage 1 playoffs, Infinite Warfare on that crazy good Splice team, and becoming an MVP in the process. And just as, I used to play a lot of COD actually when the game was good, and I had a bit of a competitive team going on at the time, and Zer0 was the player that I modelled my game off. I was a main AR for my team. I watched how Zer0 played, what spots he went to, what he did. This is especially like Infinite Warfare time, but even before that in Black Ops 3 was definitely right up there. So yeah, he was my favourite player for some time, and he was a superstar to be honest, especially during the Infinite Warfare period. But even World War II and like Black Ops 4, Zer0 was really good at that game. Zer0 was super underrated, I thought, in the Black Ops 4 season because he was on that FaZe team towards the end of the year, and he could play every role. The Sorg, the Maddox, the ICA, it doesn't matter, like, he would get the job done. So yeah, and then since the CDL, London Royal Ravens come along, and it becomes a lot more difficult for players like Zer0, and now he's in a spot where he's probably not going to get a spot back in the league. So wishing the best for him going forwards. Hopefully he can stay around the scene. But yeah, definitely a sad day for especially like UK COD fans that remember a team like this, European COD fans, of course, JoeDeceives Irish, but all these guys, apart from Bance, of course, who's still around, have parted ways from at least competing in some respect or another. So hopefully they can stay around the scene. But yes, Jacob L says many of us will be in a similar boat from Europe looking back at a legendary team just like this. Let's dive into some of the Rostermania stuff then. Right, so Zuma says this has to do with OpTic. There were some rumours emerging yesterday that Zuma was hearing that there was something coming related to OpTic, and we'll get into what that is here in a second. I will immediately, though, start with this. This was deleted by the New York subliners this morning. I'm not exactly sure why, but, well, you might be able to guess. So they tweet this out with World Champs, and there's no Priester. Now, this almost sounds like they're taking the mick, you know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't tweet this if you were going to drop Priester, would you? Surely that would be pretty disrespectful. But maybe they are, and maybe that's why they deleted it. It almost feels like this is a tweet that you do with 3 of your players and not Priester, deliberately, obviously not on the graphic, because there's been rumours over the last few days that Priester and the negotiations there aren't going so well. So maybe the social guy was like, oh yeah, sound, I'll poke fun at that by saying, oh yeah, here you go, there's no Priester in the World Champs graphic. But actually, I don't think he's going to be coming back. I mean, he might well do it. It maybe is still more likely than not that this happens. But they did end up deleting this one, and Priester then tweets this out, and the heavy implication has been that subliners and Priester, their contract negotiations aren't going to plan from Priester's perspective, and he's getting lowballed, right? We talked about it the other day. Kismet might have some sort of a bump in his contract. Priester, they're trying to pay him less money, basically, and they probably feel that there's other options out there in that flex position that they could either improve or would be lateral for Priester, and therefore he doesn't maybe have as much leverage as arguably he should. And even to take it to the next level, Priester then liked to tweet from Ben J. Nassim, who says, I'd really love to know what the gap is between ownership and Priester at the moment in terms of contract negotiations. Chemistry was a big part for sure of that team's success, and if they're 4 to 5 figures apart, it's worth the extra coin to keep it together. I agree with that, to be fair, and as Priester likes this tweet. So definitely implying that there's serious things going on there right now at the subliners, and there's a very reasonable chance that they will move on from Priester because they want to pay him less money, and if he doesn't agree, then, feels disrespected by the situation, as I would. I mean, let's be honest, I just won the World Championship for these guys with a great roster where chemistry was definitely crucial for them achieving that, and then they're, gonna say, nah, you're gonna cut your contract. Unlucky, mate. Now, apparently, this is because probably there's other players on the market, right? Especially the likes of Sib. And if Sib isn't going to OpTic, as we'll discuss here in a second, subliners apparently have their eyes on him. So if contract talks fail with Priester, they'll probably get Sib. That's the plan. And then we also get this in the replies I thought was interesting, that like Lostful GG say, okay, is he going to go to FaZe or Thieves? And FaZe is obviously out of the question because they're going to get Drazah, and that apparently has been signed. We'll see in a second. But Thieves is like, that could be possible, theoretically, right? Priester returning to Thieves, but Studio Scrumintel says neither, so that's not happening, which either means that Scrumintel believes that Thieves already have a player lined up in the role that Priester would employ, just because, you know, theoretically, Priester to Thieves wouldn't be off the table, you would imagine, because they need lots of players, and we'll dive into that in a second. I feel bad for Thieves fans at the moment, the way this has gone over the last, couple of weeks and days, really, because every single development is worse and worse for Thieves, but, Priester was on the organisation before, at least 100 Thieves, pre the CDL days, so that's one to keep your eyes on. And also, this is funny, because Crone has barely ever got anything wrong when he was doing his reporting, but one of the things he did say during April 2021, and this is true at the time, but it never came to pass, that they were looking, the subliners, at getting Sib off FaZe. They wanted to make that change. It never happened in the end, and he stayed where he was, because he was a substitute for FaZe at the time, and now, as Crone says, never wrong just early. And maybe they're thinking, well, we can get Sib now for free, could be an upgrade in terms of firepower from Priester. And you've also got to look at that subliners roster as, yes, they just won the World Championship, but it's incredibly rare that a team that wins champs can actually maintain that level. All the other teams around the subliners, OpTic, FaZe, Toronto, are all improving, right? And our subliners going to be the #1 team theoretically going into next year? I'm not sure that's the case at all. So if you are subliners and you think you could potentially upgrade, and pack a punch, even though you've just won champs, you've got to at least contemplate it. And maybe if they think Sib is that guy, then they're going to heavily consider it. And he does drop the L here, actually. It's okay, I'm reading into Sib's tweets again. I should try and stop doing this. But, Kyle says, these teams got to put some respect on your name. And then he replies saying, like, yeah, that seems like a reasonable point. So, interesting, because someone's obviously turned Sib down in some respect. I don't exactly know what the OpTic situation was there, because there's some interesting rumours that, like, OpTic never really even talked to Sib, as in, like, they didn't really even consider that option. Their guy's been Kenny from the word go, as soon as the Drazah thing fell through, and that's what we're going to have in a second. Now, finally, as I talked about yesterday, we have a contract signing gift, baby. It's official. We're here in Rostermania. It really feels like home when you start to see these hit the timeline. But, Drazah says it's official. So this is going to be FaZe, to the best of our understanding, and they should get better on paper. I mean, in terms of pacing, it should fix some of their issues there, and, I mean, FaZe are pretty nice as it is. With Drazah, they should be a little bit better. And even Envoy tweets this out. So anyway, it all started when Simp called Drazah for smoke glitching at the Kickoff Classic 2022, and seemingly implying, right, that this has now happened, that the Drazah Simp beef started then, continued throughout the entire Vanguard season, culminated the World Championship, and then has been on a war path still since then, and now they might be making up and joining together on a team. So, I mean, man, Envoy probably to Toronto, that's our current understanding, and we'll get into what it means for Thieves in a second, but this is the rumour around OpTic right now. With Drazah seemingly picking FaZe, I understand OpTic will now take a look at either Kenny or Sib. That was the discussion earlier in the day, and then quite shortly afterwards, Jacob Hell then says, actually, it's going to be Kenny. And when he gets, tailored to make these graphics, it definitely feels like it's almost, it's a here we go type moment, you know what I mean? So as Jacob Hell says, OpTic are leaning towards picking up Kenny. As far as I'm aware, there's definitely still time for this to change, but that is the latest. And OpTic Kenny would be pretty crazy, it's got to be said. He was on OpTic, okay, OpTic, right, fake OpTic, whatever, a few years ago on the OpTic Gaming Los Angeles days, and I mentioned in some detail actually the other day that the relationships with Dashy at the end of that season didn't end particularly well. There was all this, drama between the two of them. Now, they still get on and got on even at the time outside of the game, but in game, things were not so good between Kenny and Dashy, and they, departed on not particularly good terms from a chemistry perspective. Now, it's a long time has passed since then, and at the end of the day, Kenny's looking at the situation and saying, well, either I can rebuild a team on Thieves, probably not much money, or I can join OpTic, and it's kind of a no-brainer for him between those two options, given the team that OpTic are currently forming. Should OpTic, though, go for Kenny?
That's why I was like, even when Zach was getting rumored to join OpTic, it was like, it's just the exact same situation as with Dante. I think, like, Zach and Dante are very similar players. Zach's obviously better at S&D, but I think I saw like a hardpoint comparison that they were basically the same, and Zach's S&D was like miles ahead, but I think they would run into the same issues outside of just like getting kills on your scoreboard. Like, I played with Zach and I know what kind of player he is. Like, albeit his comms have improved a shit ton from when I first started playing with them in Vanguard, but they're not like where Ken's at either. I think Ken is like unironically their best fit. If you're not going to bring back Dan, which they aren't because he said that he wouldn't go back, but if that's just not happening, then I think Ken is like actually their best option for that fourth, which is insane that this is happening the last like day.
Yeah, I mean they had to move quick after it seemed like Zach made a decision, so they had to. They got to decide.
So Octane believes, yes, Kenny's the best option. And honestly, I am inclined to agree. It's pretty... and this might be a hot take, to be honest, because... recency bias is a big thing in Call of Duty. Kenny did not have a good season this past year, but Kenny's ceiling is incredibly high. I think people are forgetting that Kenny was a back-to-back event winner, MVP at Major 4 and the World Championship last year. Like, that was less than pretty much 12 months ago, and that's what Kenny was doing then. Now, he's had a bad season, for sure, by his standards here on Modern Warfare 2, but maybe there's also a part of me that thinks, well, usually Sledgehammer games, World War 2, Vanguard, Kenny's pretty good, and we're going into another Sledgehammer games, maybe there's part of that involved, but also just in terms of the role and the dynamics, right? Because if you've got to choose, Drazah I think was their first option. If you've got to choose between Kenny and Sib, it's a bit tricky, because Kenny's floor is probably lower than Sib's, but I think his ceiling is higher. I think that Kenny, when he's really performing at a top level, is right up there. He's also a winner. He's won the World Championship, and I think that when you look at a lot of the top teams, having a World Champion in there is a valuable thing to have. Having that experience, having that veteran energy and leadership, and also Kenny's comms. This is the thing, like, people look at Octane's comms on Thieves, but Kenny's comms are very good as well. And from a leadership perspective, Kenny's also a very valuable asset. So I think from some of the things that OpTic needs, Kenny fits better than Sib does. Sib would be a risk, I think, for sure. Got a lot of firepower, and you could say, well, just add in the slaying and work it out. And maybe that would work. But, and obviously with Pred, with Sib, you've got the Pred connections, you've got some existing chemistry there. So there are some benefits to Sib, for sure. Very fast player, very effective in that role. You're sure he's going to put up decent numbers. But I think that Kenny, from what OpTic actually needs, from like a leadership and potentially even a winning perspective, can add a lot of value there. Now, you will probably say that Kenny's been a sub the last couple of years, and he's been onto that role. Now, Kenny was pretty much forced into that role. Like, even in World War II on Team Caliber, he didn't want to run the SMG, but he was forced to and was the best SMG in the entire game that season. And maybe World War II Kenny as a player was never going to come back, that like final form version. But we weren't too far off, to be fair, at the end of the Vanguard season, and he was also on the sub then. But even I thought Los Angeles Thieves during the Cold War days, Kenny was on the AR and was so good. The team was just pretty dysfunctional. Like, he can shoot really straight. So yeah, I think that this is, now look, he's going to get roasted by the fans every time he YYs and he dies. And I'm sure he's aware, if he does come in here, that he is going to be the scapegoat. But then again, everyone who joins in this fourth spot is going to be the scapegoat. It's just how it works. Like, if they lose, the Drazahs, the Sibs, the Kennys, doesn't matter who the fourth is, you're going to get scapegoated by the fans. You've got to be ready for it when you lose the first event. Maybe they win the first event, but, you know, if they lose, you know how it goes. And Kenny has got to be ready for that, but, yeah, I personally think that this is actually the correct choice that OpTic making it. Probably a controversial opinion, because a lot of OpTic fans are like, Kenny, this guy's been terrible, but I think people forget a little bit too quickly what Kenny can be, what he can do in this role, where he actually wants to play. Like, I think he'd probably be more comfortable here than he would be elsewhere, so it just makes sense on many different lines. With Drazah no longer on the table, at least as far as I'm concerned. We'll discuss it more as and when things get confirmed, if they do, but I also wanted to touch on Thieves, because, man, you got to feel bad if you're a Thieves fan, and also if you're a Thieves fan, is there any reason to be a Thieves fan anymore unless you're just a fan of Nadeshot? Because the entire team has been wiped. Octane's gone into the retirement home, Drazah to FaZe, Kenny to OpTic apparently, Envoy to Toronto. Like, and I remember people said at the end of the season after champs, they were like, oh no, Thieves are going to stick it out. I'm like, even if they wanted to stick it out, someone's getting poached, as they're all UFAs, and turns out they're all getting poached. So, yeah, as Octane says, this time they took everything, because that was the Envoy line they did in that promotional video where he was like, this time we take everything, or whatever, and it turns out they took everything. So everything's gone, and I don't know what Thieves are going to do from a rebuild perspective, but it's a big challenge for them, right? And it's kind of, it's unfortunate to see the way it's gone, but they are going to be building from the ground up, to be fair, and after the top 4 teams of these 3 plus the subliners, Benjamin was implying last night that even Boston are probably the team to look out for after that. So I don't know what Thieves are up to, but those are some big questions of the coming days. Very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.